Good morning, Hacksters! Is my favorite time of the week. It's Hackster Café. We're talking this week with Caleb Kraft, who is the senior editor at Make Magazine. Good morning, Caleb. What's up?
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm not bad. A little flustered. I just got in from a trip yesterday, but like I said, this is my favorite time of the week. I'm so stoked to talk to you. Would you mind giving people a quick idea of what you're into and what you do?
Oh boy. Well,
I know
as you
it's
can
hard.
imagine, being senior editor at Make Magazine, I do a lot of stuff. In my spare time, I like to do hand engraving. I run a charity where I design or have volunteers design parts for video gamers with physical disabilities. And I have goats. That's a few
Yes.
things.
Sorry, I'm experiencing a slight technical difficulty that is being
No
checked,
problem.
and
No
I'll be right
problem at
back.
all.
But what I'm trying to pull up here is your Instagram, which shows a lot of your adventures with your goats, as well as hand engraving and things. Mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh dear. It actually requires me to quit and restart, which is very embarrassing. I'm going to see,
Well, while
cursors.
you're figuring that out, I'll talk a little bit about some of the 3D printing that's really
All right,
interesting me
perfect.
lately.
Thank you, Caleb.
No
I'll
problem.
be right
So,
back.
lately I've been really into print and place stuff. I don't know, how many of you out there are into 3D printing, but to me it always seemed kind of magical to be able to design something complex and mechanical that you can print and just pull it straight off of the bed and use it. Some great examples of this are, oh, what's that person's name? Click Spring or Clock Spring? Oh,
ClickSpring
Alex
is
is here for a second.
amazing.
Okay, there you go. Are you back?
I am
Okay,
back triumphantly. Thank you so much
wonderful.
for covering for me.
No
That is
problem.
something that does not happen very often. But yeah, you're talking about ClickSpring, who has an amazing YouTube channel.
Yeah, yeah. I loved his the stuff that he designs, being print in place and mechanical. And so it's really
Mm.
been inspiring me to learn how to do that lately. So if you've been on my Twitter or my Instagram, you'll see, oh, sorry, not ClickSpring, Clock Spring.
Oh,
It's somebody in
different. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a person in 3D printing who
Oh.
specifically does a lot of print in place mechanical stuff.
Mm.
So if you go on printables or on Thingiverse or something like that and look up Clock Spring, great work. Just really interesting design work in terms of the
Excellent.
mechanical stuff.
I think I've seen their things on Instagram, for
Yeah,
example. I would
lots of
pull
like
those up in a second, but
boxes and stuff. Yeah, there's my
yeah.
Instagram. Hopefully there's nothing offensive there. I don't think there is.
I've never seen you post anything remotely offensive. It's mostly just
Yeah.
wonderful, delightful videos of you being like, do goats like this, do goats like that. And then also your experiments with these different 3D printing platforms, which this is incredible. Is this based on
Yeah,
a
that
clock spring one, or did you design it yourself?
I designed that myself. That was last night. That's a
Oh,
purely print in place mechanical iris. It comes off the print
beautiful.
bed in one piece. You don't have to assemble anything. And
Wow. I've never tried any of these print in place mechanical things, but it concerns me when I think about doing it. Sometimes you get stringing and things like that with different
mhm.
types of filament. Do you have to? Are there any tips like you really have to have your printer dialed in or things like that that would make it easier to do print in place things and have them come off the bed ready to like that? Because that's moving really smoothly. It's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the the tip that really pushed me over, and I just learned this recently, and it's so dumb, but what really pushed me over is the fact that if you just put if your printer's dialed in pretty well, like my
Uh-huh.
stock Prusas, um, if you just put a half of a millimeter of a gap between two
Mm.
layers, they'll break apart from each other and be free. So you can literally just stack junk on top of each other and put a half millimeter gap and they'll print and be free more or less. And that's with PLA. I've tested it. I don't know about other materials, but it's really interesting how forgiving the printers can be actually.
I guess that makes sense because that's kind of how rafts work, right? When you
Yeah.
print on top of a raft. Yeah. For some reason, I always assumed that the slicer would freak out and be like, these things aren't attached, but they're actually not that smart necessarily.
Yeah, well, if you put too big of a gap, then they try to, then
Mm.
they have problems. But at a half millimeter, It works fine. I mean, it's
Cool.
not great. It's not the best way to do it, but it's a great way to get started playing with it.
Legit. And you've worked with a bunch of different 3D printing tools. I'm curious about what your main one is nowadays, but also I'd like to dive into some of the other ones that you've been featuring lately. So what's your current setup and like in terms of the software and also the printer?
Okay, so for design software, I jump back and forth and around between Fusion 360, which I'm pretty familiar with, and SolidWorks' new program. They're a sponsor at Make. I want to disclaim that. They are a
Mm,
sponsor at Make. But I've been trying to learn their software as well, so I've been playing with that too. So I bounce between those two for mechanical stuff. For digital sculpting, which is another one of my many, many hobbies,
mm.
Nomad Sculpt on the iPad is magical. Magical. It's like ZBrush if you've ever seen that.
That's so
Um,
interesting to me.
then let's see. For printers, I mostly prefer Prusa's. Again, a disclaimer: Prusa sponsors my side project, the charity.
Hmm.
So of course I'm biased there, but also just like a lot of people, as soon as I got a Prusa printer and printed with it, I kind of didn't want to go back to cheap printers that required all kinds of modifications, to get them printing well. So
Mm.
I mainly print on Prusa printers and use Fusion and SolidWorks.
Wow. Um, awesome. And you mentioned Nomad Nomad Sculpt, which I've tried doing a little bit of different 3D modeling programs on the iPad, and a big issue seems to be like trying to rotate the thing around or like get a good view on the object. Do you feel like they do a good job of that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's more intuitive on a touch interface like an
Hmm.
iPad, or I always kind of lusted after the Wacom Cintiq, which is a display and a tablet in one.
Yeah.
Um, and really, an iPad does that for you. And once you can touch the screen, then rotating it around and stuff just feels more intuitive.
Huh.
I would never go back. I can't do it on a monitor now.
You don't need one of those 3D haptic mice or whatever, the what are they called? Space
Yeah.
mouse or something?
I'm sure that would be nice, but no, I feel, the touch screen really kind of breaks that barrier down for me
Nice.
a little bit better.
Oh, I'm gonna have to check this out now. Oh, exciting.
It's
You've
cheap. It's
also
like I don't know the exact price, but it's like 15. It's less than $20. It's like $15, I think, for the full package.
That's
I mean, it's
incredible.
crazy.
iPad apps are such a deal because, you know, somehow people seem to charge much less for them than desktop software, even when they're like equally or better,
Yeah.
equally powerful or better for the applications. Huh.
Yep. Yep.
You've also, besides being the editor for Make, you also write articles sometimes, including
Hmm.
about, for example, this Lithophane tool. Could you tell us what's going on here?
Yeah, that's a cool tool. I can't remember the URL off the top of my head, and I've closed everything so that I don't interfere
Oh
with the
yeah,
video.
I
But
believe
yeah, it
in.
was a cool tool that came out recently that's totally free, where you can upload your own images to make lithophanes, which of course are cool tricks of light where you have a material that the different thicknesses transmit light differently. So like the thicker it is, the darker it is. So you can basically 3D print a photograph, a black and white
So cool.
photograph. It's
You
really
know,
cool.
I've seen lots of lithophanes around, and they never really caught my creative eye until I saw these ornaments and realized, of course, you can embed them into other things and make them into complete objects on their own. I mean, it is kind of magical, like sticking one in a window pane and like seeing the sunlight through it. But
One of
this,
the
I think,
most one of the most clever uses of this that I've seen is all these moon lamps you see. You see them all over like
oh yeah,
Thingiverse and printables, and it's the moon, but it uses the same principle of thin and thick spots so that if you put a light inside of it, it looks like the moon lit up by the sun. It's gorgeous. I've got one sitting back here somewhere. It's just off camera.
you also got excited about a moon phase clock recently, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All kinds of good stuff there. Oh my god, yeah. You're totally right. I have seen those and they're gorgeous. Uh,
Yeah, it's the same principle. It's so cool.
they seem to have a lot of I often see them in the context of like this was a 20-hour print and it had an issue in hour 18, but as long
Yep,
as you can get it to go all the way through, then you're golden.
very true.
Here's another one you were talking about, low polyfy your 3D models online for free. I think this is one of the ones by Andrew Sink.
Yeah. I thought it was a great tool. Again, a free online tool. Upload your file, turn a slider, and it makes it low poly.
Good
Not
stuff.
necessarily the most practical tool, but I thought it was really neat.
It's very aesthetic. Um, so back to what you're doing with 3D printing. One of the cool things you've done recently is these frog monster planters. Can you tell us about this project?
Sure, those are just a little bit of a creative output dump. And admittedly, I think I'm going to try to sell some of those on Etsy before I give the
Oh,
files out for free. I've seen people kind of saying that planters are big on Etsy right now, and I
huh.
don't know, I get a kick out of selling stuff sometimes. So I'm going to give it a try. Yeah, those are little planters that they're little monsters or frogs or something.
I love how you mentioned that the tall one can be used as a watering can. I think it showed it somewhere in your
It
feed, but
would
I
be
can't find it now.
newer, and I don't know if I posted it
Yeah.
to Instagram.
Ah, maybe it was on your Twitter.
I don't have any
But
sitting right here within reach, but I have all
oh
those
yeah, here
printed.
we
Just haven't shown them off yet.
go. Beautiful.
Oh, I guess I did. There they are.
What kind of resin or not resin, but filament, I'm assuming, is this? Or is it
So that is
for sure it's
PLA.
filament, right?
I'm printing those, yeah, on a filament printer. That's PLA. There's the water pouring out of the
So
tall skinny
good.
one. I'm using PLA because it prints beautifully, but I got to admit I feel a little bit guilty with the waste on something like this. So I
Hmm.
think I'm going to try switching completely over to PETG for things like this because
Interesting.
PETG can be completely recycled. It's not PETG is the wrong material for like the controllers that I make
Mm-hmm.
for other reasons, but for something like this, I think PETG is perfect.
Ah, that's so interesting because you often hear about PLA being compostable, although of course it can only be composted in industrial facilities and stuff. And it's true. Actually, I always end up like saving it in bags or containers or whatever. I never actually end up composting it or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, PETG. Can that also be recycled again after it's printed with?
I believe so. I don't
So
know the
cool.
details on recycling PETG, but from what I understand, it's one of the easiest and most commonly recycled plastics. And the fact
Yeah,
that
like
you can
water bottles
buy,
and stuff.
yeah, and like there's a bunch of people. I think Prusa, I think Tallman, Taulman, Green. Oh, geez, somebody sent me some filament PETG. Anyway, a bunch of
Mm.
people are selling completely 100% recycled PETG already, which is fantastic.
Yes, I love it. You're
Yeah.
seeing more and more recycled filament around, and I think it dovetails very nicely with the repair movement, which we can get into a little bit as
Yeah,
well. Ha
yeah.
ha ha. But for now, you've mentioned a couple times your wonderful charity, the Controller Project. Let's check this out. Tell us about this. I think this is one of the coolest things that you do, and you said that it's been going for more than 10 years now. Is that true?
Roughly, but that's a bit of a boastful statement that has kind of some gaps in it. I started messing around with controllers whenever I started working at Hackaday back in 2008 or 2009, just kind of casually. I did
Mm,
my first public project in like 2012, 2011, a kid named Thomas. Um, and that's really whenever it kicked off as something that I felt passionate about, whenever I really
mm.
interacted with this person um, and saw into his life. And I've been doing it ever since. There have been periods where I've had to back away because it's just kind of overwhelming. And there have been periods where I go hard. And last year I committed to just really go all in and we've been going nuts. We've shipped more controllers this year than I did last year for the whole year.
Wow, nice. In
Yeah.
just 4 months, 3 months.
Yep. Yep.
Um, this is one that so this is a collection that you've made of not only yours but also ones from the community, and I just wanted to show some of them. Just
Yes.
like look at this one-handed Xbox
So
controller.
that guy specifically, his name is Akaki
Mm-hmm.
Kumeri. I don't know if I'm mispronouncing that. I apologize to him if I am. But he is an incredible designer, and he did a PlayStation 1 first. And I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, I will give you all the money I have saved up if you'll do." He did a PlayStation 5 first. I said, "I'll give you all the money I have saved up if you do a PlayStation 4 and an Xbox."
Wow.
And he graciously said, "You don't have to pay me. I'll do it." He did them
Oh.
both. Those have been the most requested ones this year. I've probably shipped myself and my volunteers have probably shipped 20 or 30 of those, which is incredible. And there, who knows how many more have been printed from him or just straight off of printables. It's just been, that has been a life-changing design right there. It's an incredible design.
Oh, I love this.
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
exactly why I get up on Tuesdays. I love this.
I've actually got one right here.
Oh, cool.
Same one.
That's so rad. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a little hard to tell sometimes from the pictures exactly how it works. But that's so cool.
Yeah, this bottom part, you either hook it to your leg or you put a foot on it. So you can hold it. It's really hard to do this backwards in front of the camera, but you can hold it with one hand and move both this thumbstick and that thumbstick just by moving the controller. And then you can hit these buttons as well.
That is so cool.
It's an incredible design. He did fantastic work.
I also love how on this one you can see that different colors of filament have been embedded, just like cut pieces of filament embedded to make these different colors.
Admittedly, I get a little lazy and I don't do that part a lot of the time. But
well, someone can always do it themselves when they get it. It gives you
That's
a little
right.
extra to do. I think these are some little separately 3D printed caps or something that went on there.
Yep.
Super cool. And you could always just paint it as well. But yeah, there's ones for all kinds of different controllers and stuff. What's it like working with volunteers? It seems like, you know, for this, you're not only building stuff and shipping it out and stuff, but you're also managing a core of volunteers. And obviously, there's ways for people to get involved if you're excited about it from watching the show.
Sure. It's been interesting. I don't have a ton of jobs coming in. I've done, maybe 40 this year. And I do a lot of those myself. So, mainly I work with volunteers in Europe or other places around the world. But it's been interesting working with them and trying to come up with ways of organizing it and tracking it and, kind of dealing with the frustrations. I'd say a good percentage, maybe half of volunteers are very enthusiastic about it until they have to print something like this controller, and then they'll take the job and disappear. So then I have to keep following up and then reassign it to someone else and talking with the person who wants the controller as well, to keep them updated. So it really is kind of time consuming, but it allows me to do things like send controllers to people in France and England and Australia and stuff like that without me having to ship them.
Yeah, and without dealing with so many customs issues as well. So many, like we do contests and things and just trying to ship things to people around the world so frequently, like either it'll get blocked or tied up for weeks, or there end up being surprise charges that they have to pay a bunch of money.
Yeah, I ran a contest with Prusa, and I didn't think real hard about it. I offered up Pancake Bots as the prizes. All three of my winners were in Europe or Japan, and I ended up spending over $600 in shipping.
Oh my gosh.
But at that point, I had already committed to it, and I felt like for me to back out would be wrong. So lesson learned.
And were you involved with the creation of Pancake Bot, or?
No, but I know Miguel, the owner, the founder, creator person. I've met him at Maker Fairs. He's a wonderful guy. He donated 2 bots to the contest, and I bought one as well.
Oh, cool.
It's a fun tool. It's a fun toy thing.
Both. Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like 3D printers are that way as well. They're kind of toys, kind of tools and stuff. Speaking of which, I have a question. I don't actually know if you do or not, but you 3D print stuff all the time. Do you ever 3D print stuff for use on your do you call it on your farm, or do you just say with your goats, or?
I hesitate to call it a farm because I don't produce anything. It's more like a petting zoo, like my own personal petting zoo. Sometimes
I'm so jealous, by the way.
Yeah, they're sweet. They're adorable. I 3D print some practical things for outside. Generally, I'm low tech. Like, I don't have any automated system for opening and closing the chicken coop. I just let them come and go. The goats kind of keep the predators away.
Really?
Oh, you're about to see Gilly down here. She's adorable. There's
Like,
Gilly.
oh, I'm
Yeah.
surprised the goats keep the predators away.
They don't like actively fight them away, but just like, raccoons and stuff won't go into the coop right there with the goats.
Cool.
So I'm generally pretty low tech, but I do print things like, little brackets to hold things,
Mm.
or clamps, or a little thing to hold like the food scoop,
Oh
in their
yeah,
food. Mostly just tiny practical things.
cool. Pardon me, I'm gonna sneeze. Oh nope. Maybe I will when the thing comes off the plate.
Also on.
Oh, different kind of technical difficulties. Okay, I'm not gonna sneeze. Um, but you've also printed, or actually, I'm not sure if you printed or not, but these beautiful hand engravings that you do. Obviously, we have to talk about them, but there's also some. If I'm not wrong, you a while ago created an auto. I'm not sure what you would call it, but like a sort of auto tool to help you engrave. Is that right?
Sort of. I tried
Like
and
a
it
pedal
failed.
to. Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's interesting too. Tell us about the failures.
All it was a company had sent a haptic device to me, which is effectively a very tiny but very strong solenoid.
Uh huh.
And it's called the tack hammer. It's for use
Ah.
inside game controllers mainly, or virtual reality devices. And I was sitting there looking at it one day, and I thought, that might work perfectly to be an electronic version of my pneumatic engraver. The pneumatic engraver has a tiny piston that taps inside of
Mm.
it, so it's like using a hammer and chisel, but I can just hold it with one hand instead of
Mm.
having to tap it with a hammer, so I can hold the work with the other hand. Um, so I thought I'd make an electronic version. I put it all together and used this tack hammer, but ultimately the tack hammer at its strongest point was just too weak.
Ah.
So I may revisit that later with a solenoid, just a
Mm.
plain solenoid and an Arduino and to control the speed. But there are open source plans for this exact thing out there already that I'll probably follow.
Mm. Ooh, we have a comment from the 3D printing professor. I've always thought those one-handed controllers look like a flute. And it seems like there's a lot of overlap there. It's the same kind of idea, right? You're trying to control lots of buttons without
Yeah,
moving your hands around a lot and without like a
yeah.
limited number of yeah.
Those arms with the little bent pad on the end and stuff certainly do look a lot like a
Yeah.
brass instrument, don't they? That's
I guess
interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but it does.
I think it makes sense. It's like a very similar sort of problem to solve, I think,
Hmm.
maybe.
Hmm.
Here's an interesting one. So you said you were playing with clocky things. Is this a kit you were assembling, or were you like designing this?
That's a kit from U Gears. If
Oh
you
yeah.
just Google the letter U and then Gears, they have all these kits that are laser cut wood, and a lot of
Mm.
them have mechanical motion to them. Really cool kits.
I do see what looks like a 3D printed part. Oh no, that's a
Yeah, that's a
spring.
spring. So that's a clock with a
Oh.
flying I don't know if it's tourbillon or tourbillon. Being an American saying French words,
Yeah.
right? We don't know how we're supposed to do it. But that has a flying tourbillon on the top that you can't see there, which
Ah.
has a really cool mechanical motion to it. Unfortunately, I never really got that to work at a time, and I didn't have the attention span to keep fighting with it.
But clocks seem to be a theme that I notice in your feed. Like you seem to be very fascinated by like moon clocks, physical, mechanical clocks, things like that. Have you ever designed or thought about designing a clock of your own?
Well, not so much clocks specifically, but I love, I guess it's called clockwork. I love the
Mm.
mechanical functions and the purely, you know, zero power, zero electrical power motion that you can get out of a spring or something like that. And I've tried designing a few things like little orreries and things
Oh
like that
yeah.
that are gear driven, and even some large ones that I never completed. But man, gears are complicated. I can fuss my way through a kind of simple gear train, where your errors, kind of add up to only a little bit of a problem. But once you start getting into like 30 gears, 40 gears, having a little bit of error adds up for every gear, and you end up with something that just doesn't work.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm still working my way into that.
Yeah, and it seems like you'd have to have a specific, it's going to be really hard to sculpt some
Yeah.
gears. That could be really interesting. I don't know if you started out with like a sort of parametric design for a gear and then like sculpted on top of it or something that could be really
Yeah,
cool. But like
yeah.
it seems like a whole different workflow than a lot of what you tend to do.
It is. There's a really powerful tool called Gearotic Motion. I haven't looked at it
Mm.
in a couple years, but it allows you, like, you can say, I want 10 gears and I want to, this end, I want run one rotation to be 360 rotations at the other end. And it'll give you a gear train that then you can take into your CAD program and design.
Ooh.
But it's super powerful, but my goodness, even with that super powerful tool, gear trains they hurt
Wow.
my brain once you get beyond 2 or 3 gears.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm always trying to visualize the gear. Oh my gosh, look at this one.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to visualize the gears on my bike because I'm trying to, like, internalize, like, okay, it makes sense that, like, this one is larger and it's talking to the smaller one and that's driving a bigger wheel and stuff, but, like, somehow, like, I always have to, like, redo it after a while. I lose the intuitive sense, and eventually I think it'll click, but then you get stuff like this.
Yeah,
This is a really
yeah.
cool tool, it looks like, but wow.
Super powerful.
Oh my gosh. I have another question for you about that's a little bit off to the side. You mentioned that you were interested in maybe selling some 3D printed things on Etsy.
Mhm.
And I've worked previously with getting things printed by Shapeways, which is kind of nice because you can have a little shop on there and people can sort of order them and pay for them through that interface and then they'll ship it to wherever.
Mhm.
But of course, you don't get to like have your hands on the product, but that's kind of a plus in some ways. I'm curious, are there reasons that you prefer Etsy to other platforms as a creator?
Uh, Etsy has its problems. There are a lot of resellers and stuff on there, which is really frustrating. And people selling 3D models that they don't have the rights to, going
Oh,
against the
yeah.
license, which is also frustrating. But I haven't checked the prices in a very long time, but I didn't find Shapeways to be competitive for low cost items made out of PLA. If I were to print some jewelry or something, I would certainly go to Shapeways, and maybe that's changed. Admittedly, I haven't looked in a long time, but I kind of like the process of making something and throwing it on there for sale, and having a conversation with the person that bought it, and sending them a nice little note with it, and I kind of like that personal touch.
Yeah. Plus, I guess with Etsy, you're able to sell a lot more than just 3D printed things.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I've ever even sold 3D printed stuff on there before.
Ah,
The only way I'll do it is if it's my own personal design.
right.
And so it just hasn't been something I've done before, but I don't know. I'm gonna give it a try, I think.
Mhm, nice. Uh, Speaking of which, this is your website. I'm actually curious where your Etsy is because now I want to go and dig through
Ah,
and see what you've got on there.
I should put a
And
link
like,
on there.
yeah,
You just have to
totally.
Google Caleb Craft Etsy. It's
Okay.
probably the only one.
I
But
just tried and I think I came up with a fail, but let's
there's
see
probably
what
nothing
happened.
on there.
Oh, maybe that's it.
Oh, well,
I don't know.
maybe I have more
Whatever.
than one Etsy account. I
We'll
don't know.
find it and we'll put it in the description after the fact.
Yeah,
Of
I don't
course,
know.
people can. It's chill, but I am really curious to see, just to like follow you maybe and see what you put up
I've
there.
done stuffed animals, I've done engravings,
We
but
have
I've
Peter
never
Brown in
done
here saying he's got a Caleb custom penny.
oh, yep, a hand engraved penny. I handed those out one year at an event.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. I remember you coming to a maker fair one time and just having sort of a little keychain with a bunch of different samples on it of
Yep.
stuff that you were showing off. Speaking of maker fairs, we kind of have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know what the situation is with maker fairs right now? Everyone's kind of
Yeah.
curious about like what the. I know we've got the Maker Music Fest coming up.
Well, the Maker Music Fest is not associated with us. That's
Oh, okay.
something Sherry Huss, who used to work at Make,
Mm-hmm.
is. I don't know if she's organizing it or if she's just helping promote it.
Mm,
But it looks awesome. Check
it
it out for
does.
sure. But it is not connected with us. Now,
Aha.
Maker Fairs they're interesting right now because it's a global thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it's. I don't want to call it a franchise, but each one is run by local community organizers. So it's kind of up to them on whether or not they're willing to come back to having live events yet. I went to one at the end of 2021 down in Orlando. Um,
Yeah. You
but
have
what
some
you'll see
photos
is,
up.
like, sometimes there's spikes of COVID and people call them off.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes in areas where there's less, they'll have the in-person events. So you really just have to go to makerfair.com and look and see if there's one near you that's happening. And hopefully hopefully we'll be able to get this thing under control enough that we can have more of these live events, because that's where I feel the magic really is in
Yeah.
person. That's
Like,
Ian. I forgot Ian's last name, but he helps run Maker Faire Orlando, and that's
uh-huh.
from their local makerspace. It's awesome.
Ah! Yeah, I love seeing you post. You got a few things up here from more recent maker fairs, which is very encouraging. Little Mickey's going.
Yeah, yeah,
And makerfair.com. I just pulled it up and I've already lost.
yeah. Makerfaire.com.
There we go.
We try to
Yeah.
keep it up to date,
Mm-hmm.
on which ones are coming up and which areas, but it's always in a state of flux, especially with
Exciting.
the pandemic going on still. So
Absolutely. I imagine, the one in the Bay Area, there was always a large outdoor area and sort of
uh-huh.
these big warehouses and stuff. So, even then it was kind of not too bad. There's
Yeah.
definitely always outdoor stuff. We have Lionel in here saying, "Oh, always with the troll image, with the little hair on there. Maker Fair soon in Ghent at the end of the month. Please feel free to join over in Belgium." So everyone in
Awesome.
Europe, check that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of areas in Europe where the pandemic is less in full
It's fun.
swing, so they're having more in-person events. So we're seeing more of them over there.
What are some of the other ones that you've been to recently and other cool stuff that you saw?
Well, the last one I went to, of course, was in Orlando, and that was the
Yeah.
only one I've been to since the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I've been to, in person, I mean. I've been to
Mhm.
maker fairs all over the world. I've been to them in China, in Canada, and then, of course, all over the States. I've been to a bunch of them. There's a few that I've never made it to that I'd love to see, actually.
Ooh.
Um, and they may or may not be having them right now, but like Atlanta, I always thought Atlanta, Georgia would have been a cool one to see. I don't know if they're having one
Mm.
this year. They might kind of be in a state of flux with the organizers, but I'm located in kind of the very top edge of the South, and so I like seeing kind of the local flavor around here and see things that are not necessarily on the coasts. And then, I'd like to see East Coast of New York. So just a few I'd like to see.
Yeah, I'm afraid you went a little bit robot there during the last one we were
Oh,
talking about that
sorry.
you'd like to see.
Sorry. Am I back yet?
You are back, yes.
Oh,
I'd love to
okay.
hear what the last one was you were gonna say.
Oh, I was just saying, I'd love to see East Coast that's not New York, just because the only East
Mhm.
Coast fair that I've been to is New York.
Yeah.
I guess I saw Orlando. That's kind of East Coast, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'd
it's
like to see
true.
the
You don't really
middle.
think of it as East Coast because it's like so far in Florida, it's like Florida town.
Yep,
I don't know.
yep.
Maybe that's just me.
Or maybe one in the West,
Mm.
like New Mexico or something. That'd be a cool one to see. I just love
Phoenix
how.
seems to have an amazing
Ooh,
scene.
yeah,
Shout out to our Phoenix friends.
yeah.
You were
I,
saying?
I I love how each one kind of has its own local flavor, because it is a
Yeah.
community event. It's about who the local makers are. So every maker fair is different. Sure, there's some things you see. You see some 3D printing at everyone, and you see some cosplay at everyone. But I really love seeing local arts and crafts, local makers that are really working with like the local cultures, and especially reaching back into like indigenous cultures of the areas.
Yeah.
Um, it's really fascinating, and not just here in the States, but even in Europe and in China. It's just really a cool aspect of it all.
Beautiful. And there's a feature about Maker Faire on the magazine website.
Hmm.
All kinds of cool stuff going on. And also, I noticed in your most recent issue, you were talking about the war on repair.
Hmm.
Um, that's I'm really excited to see actually that that's becoming a huge focus of the community right now and of legislation. We have the iFixit folks and Bunny Huang all like advocating for right to repair,
Yeah.
as well as many others in the community that I'm sure that I don't already know about. But yeah, and you also had this amazing event that I'm so sad that I missed with Cory Doctorow and a bunch of other people talking about
Hmm.
repair. Could you tell us? So for people like me, who sadly had to miss that event. Could you tell us about what what the conversation is like in that space right now?
Well, unfortunately, I missed the event too.
Oh yeah, but you edited the magazine presumably.
Yeah, yeah. Mike Sinise ran that event, and
Mm,
unfortunately, I missed it. But I can tell you that we had a few different angles to look at it. Cory Doctorow always kind of has a very broad, high-level angle of looking at things that is kind of about how it affects culture and society.
yeah.
Whereas like Kyle Waynes from iFixit really gets into
Hmm.
the nitty-gritty of like legislation and the actual hardware itself. You know. So we really tried hard to find as many different angles to look at this as possible. We didn't want to just keep telling the same story you've maybe seen on the news or something like that. We didn't want to talk about John Deere tractors necessarily as
Hmm.
much as things that the makers are a little bit more familiar with, and different angles to look at it.
Yeah, there's Bunny's angle, which is more sort of about privacy and like your ability to control where your information's going, especially if you're like a journalist. I saw a talk by Dr. years and years ago, which is partly why I got so excited about that sort of blew my mind about how um, being able to repair your own hardware comes down to, for example, healthcare and the future, especially in this country where our healthcare situation is not the best. How you could be beholden to an insurance company that might be able to like shut off your prostheses or other devices, and also other ones that I've heard from other people about privacy when it comes to like implantables and like who's allowed to update those or pull data off of them and with what permissions and when's the notification and things like that. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
do you see your 3D printing, do you find yourself using, your maker skills for repair? And I'm curious about what kind of ones
I
you're
do a
doing.
little bit of repair. There's a lot of electronics that break. Now I'm not as well versed in electronics as some of my peers. I actually ran Hackaday for quite a well, worked at Hackaday for quite a while before I even ever touched a microcontroller. Mike
Mm,
Stish, who ran Hackaday after I left and did a fantastic job, he's the one
mm.
who actually convinced me to get into microcontrollers after dealing with analog electronics for a long time.
Oh!
Anyway, just a little anecdote for you.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, I do a little bit of repair. I'll crack something open and see if I can find a bad capacitor, a bad solder joint, and often that's what you find. But with microelectronics, that's not necessarily often something you can do. If it's
Yeah.
not a plug that's broken or an obvious part that needs to be replaced, I don't do a lot of microelectronic repair. It's mainly bigger things.
Kinda makes sense, like, that stuff is a lot, it takes a lot more sort of specialized experience.
Hmm.
But you did mention just now that you, got into microcontrollers and things after being into analog electronics for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, tell us about that.
So I got into analog electronics I don't know, maybe like fourth grade. My parents like to put me in summer school every year to just broaden my horizons. And one year I did an electronics course, and we built a color organ or sound organ, a color organ. It was lights that would light up based on sound. And I learned schematic. I learned how to solder at that young age. And after that, I found electronics interesting. I wouldn't say it was even necessarily a hobby, but I found it interesting. Um, and over the years, I got a little bit more and more into it. And eventually, at some point, I was working at Hackaday and I had a fundamental understanding of electronics, and I understood enough about code and microcontrollers to be able to write about them. But I personally had never programmed a microcontroller for quite a while during the
Mm.
Hackaday times. And Mike Stish, I believe he really liked AVR microcontrollers. This would have been the early days
Oh,
of
wow.
Arduino.
Mhm.
So I had a project I wanted to do, and I was too lazy to sit down and draw up a circuit with timers to do it. I wanted a red and blue light to flash like police. And I was talking to him, and he's like, "I'll do it." And he sent me just a really elegant little. It was just an AVR microcontroller and some LEDs and a battery pack, and maybe a resistor and possibly a capacitor and a potentiometer, and that was it. And and it had a bunch of different effects, and it speed up and slow down, and it really got me interested in it. And then, Arduino took over the world by storm, and I realized that I had a little bit of background in C++. And I realized with that, I could copy and paste my way even into fairly complex projects. As long as you
Yeah,
understand the structures, you don't really have to know how to create it from scratch.
absolutely. And I think that's one of the hugely alluring things about
Oh yeah,
Arduino and stuff, where yeah, exactly, where you can sort of start off uh, so many projects by just sort of searching up a code example for what someone has done and just like
yeah,
suddenly it's there, especially with built-in LEDs and stuff. Um,
absolutely, absolutely.
and
Like Adafruit, in my mind, really pushed the boundaries of all that and opened it up
mm,
to such a wider audience when they started doing um, the I just blanked on the name of it. It's round and it has a ring of LEDs around the outside,
the Circuit
but
Playground Express.
yeah, the
I
Circuit
love
Playground.
those. I love those so
I
much.
really feel like that really opened up the door for a lot of people who maybe felt were maybe cosplayers or something that didn't feel comfortable soldering and doing wires and stuff, and didn't necessarily know what parts would work with other parts. I just think that was such a they did a fantastic job with that.
I totally agree. I think that's one of the best boards for beginners. Absolutely. You've got built-in RGB LEDs in a ring shape, which is so good for, Iron Man stuff or like fairy wands or like anything you want to do. You've got an accelerometer. I think there's a sound sensor. There's a couple of buttons on it. There's all these different ways to interact with it. There's even, I think, a temperature sensor. There might be a compass. There's definitely, anyway,
So much,
all these,
yeah.
you just have instant access to it, and they have the drag and drop programming interface that you can then switch over to other languages. Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
love that board.
Yep.
Speaking of which, you're looking for people. You're talking about this red and blue flashing circuit. Made me think of, like, I was like, I wonder what he's using that for. Is it a Halloween costume or what? And you're already looking for examples of what people's favorite Halloween projects are from years past. Are you thinking about Halloween? And
Well, I am. Oh, sorry, you were reading the tweet, weren't you?
huh? Oh
Oh,
no,
sorry. Were
I was
you
not
asking?
reading the
Okay.
tweet. I was actually asking you, but I also was going to, as I usually do, pile on another question before you
Yeah.
can answer the first one, which is like, what kinds of things you've built for Halloween in the past. But please go on.
Well, I'm a lazy Halloween guy. I don't usually build a whole lot since I'm building stuff all year.
Hmm.
I've done a little bit here and there, cobwebs and taking skeletons and putting plastic wrap around them and hitting it with a hair dryer or a heat gun so it shrinks up and looks all creepy.
Oh.
But uh, before I go to that, you asked what I was using those red and blue lights for, and this was
Yeah.
years ago. But it was a dog that wouldn't let other dogs play, and we called her the safety police. And so Mike Stish made the circuit to put on our collar. Anyway, back to Halloween.
Wait, so the dog would just sort of like, if it saw other dogs playing, would be like, "Hey, no."
Yeah, she'd run over and she'd stop them. So we called her the fun police. That's what we called her, not the safety police. So we had made a red and blue flashing collar. Great job,
That's
Mike
adorable.
Stish, on that one. For those of you that don't know, Mike Stish, SZCYZCS or whatever, that's the person who ran Hackaday for a long time.
Hmm.
Anyway, Halloween.
Yes.
One of the coolest things I did was actually a project for Make. I
Hmm.
did some giant inflatable tentacles. If you just Google or go on YouTube and search giant DIY giant inflatable tentacles, I showed people how to make massive, like 10-foot long inflatable tentacles
Oh my gosh.
that you can like stick out your windows and
Ah!
stuff like that. You like those? I lit those up with a green light. They look so cool.
Oh
You
my
can kind of see
gosh.
it in the thumbnail there. Um, that's probably the coolest thing that I did, and usually I don't put that much effort into it. Uh, yeah, they're great. Um,
Wow.
but the reason I'm looking for Halloween stuff now is that every year I feel like Halloween is done. I don't want to say I don't do Halloween the way I want at
Ah.
Make. And that is we post a few articles leading up, maybe, but then after we post a lot because that's when everybody
Yeah.
publishes their stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So this year I'm looking for projects. I'm actively looking for projects right now, and I'm gonna get them in. I want to get the whole story, the whole pictures, and everything, so that like closer to Halloween, we can really give people a lot of inspiration, a lot of step-by-step projects, complex projects, easy projects. It's just this year I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do Halloween right. So
I love it.
if you have Halloween projects, reach out to me.
Yes, and everyone that's on Caleb's Twitter, oops, let's go back there. It's just twitter.com/Caleb Kraft. And it's from a few days ago. I feel your pain very much, and we're also trying to like start doing things early in advance. We just had the April Fool's thing, and of course, I was like feverishly getting that done at 11 a.m. Pacific time.
Yep, yep.
But we're working on it. And I find that as someone who does electronic stuff on YouTube and such, at the same time, I don't necessarily consume a lot of that content. And as someone who is creating things and pushing things out there, how do you learn and where do you go for inspiration? I know that I find a lot of stuff on our site as well, but also from Reddit and other places, or obviously Make Magazine, other and like Diode and Reinvented and such. I don't know. Where do you go? Where do you find inspiration?
Well, I go a few places, but this brings up a really important topic that we should come back to, and that's diversity.
Ooh, yes.
But before we get to that, I'll tell you where I find my stories. Every day, I wake up super early to make my kids breakfast before they go to school. I have teenagers, and I feel that it's super important that I have something that I do daily where we interact. Otherwise,
Mhm.
whatever. Those of you who are parents get it. Those of you who are not don't care. So I wake up early, I fix them breakfast, and they leave. And it's like 6 a.m. So I've got plenty of time before I really need to get to work. I sit down with a cup of coffee. I browse YouTube, even though I get so sick of the negative comments on YouTube and I get burnt out on YouTube real easy. I
Mm.
skim through it, I browse it. I browse Reddit. I hit my Twitter.
Mhm.
Um, TikTok. That's been a big one lately, TikTok. And I
TikTok?
go to
Oh, yeah.
Instagram. And I try to make a point at least 2 or 3 times a week to look at things that are not just my feed. I'll type in a
Mm.
hashtag or just look at, random stuff or search random terms, looking for new people.
Hmm.
And that's where I find my stories. I every day I put a little bit of time into just looking around, following people, finding new stuff.
Yeah, I love that. I do find, through suggestions that these platforms push at me that I get a certain amount of new stuff, but not necessarily all
Mhm.
that. And bringing it back to diversity, I do find that in the explore pages, as with anywhere else. Well, actually, no. Yeah, it's sort of like the main media tends to have sort of more established types of people that you see,
Yes.
but maybe in this all this uh, bottom up generated content, like the people are. And it's not even like generated content. It's like people making stuff. It's just people making stuff and putting it
Yeah.
out there, and therefore, by nature, it is more diverse. Yeah, interesting.
Well, I actually have a strategy for
Ooh,
diversity that
great.
I have adhered to for quite a while, and I feel it's very important.
Mm.
Now, when I speak about this, I'm not speaking for Make. I work at Make, and this is my personal way that I do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not speaking for Make. I see a lot of people, a lot of places that have struggled with diversity. Make, previous to my employment, had some issues. Leah Buchley, or
Euclid?
BEA, I think, BEU. Leah Buchley did a presentation years ago about how it was
Mm.
mostly white males on the cover of Make, and she had a point, and
Mhm.
they've worked hard to fix that. But I see a lot of places that have this problem, and how they address it typically is at that end point of what they're publishing. And
Mm.
personally, and I can't speak for Make, personally, I think that's the wrong approach. Um, I I have made an effort ever since then, ever since Leah's presentation, and then I saw a tweet. I don't remember who tweeted it. They said, "Go through your Twitter, who you follow right now, and count how many women there are, or count how many
Mm.
people,
Mhm.
people of color there are." And they had a good point. So I intentionally will every once in a while I'm browsing, just make sure that I'm following as many people as possible and that there are included people. And if I notice that there's a huge gap, Like I noticed in cosplay, I didn't have a single person that wasn't a middle-aged white guy for a while.
Huh.
And so I started asking, just who can I follow that isn't a middle-aged white guy? And I don't have a problem with middle-aged white guys,
No, yeah.
but I want my pool, I want the projects that I see to have diversity at that lowest level so that it will feed upwards to the stories that I tell. You know, if I see something awesome, if I don't have those people in the selection pool, how will they get selected?
Yes, absolutely. Especially having you be at such a high level and makes such an impact there. Also, as someone who gets put on a lot of lists where there's like, Twitter, like everyone who's the women in hardware you follow, and like then it becomes this like overwhelming thing. That's also
Yep.
just me being an introvert, but like Becky Stern, for example, has published a list that she updates of women in hardware, and like anytime that someone is like, you know hey, like spam me all your women in hardware, and then we all get like a million notifications, which is,
Yep.
I can't complain because I think it's wonderful that people are doing that, and they're promoting each other and me, and I do appreciate that, and stuff like that. But also it gets kind of overwhelming, and it becomes kind of an extra amount of work that you got to do, but also an extra opportunity to become to be promoted. But it also is nice to have these like resources where people can self-identify and opt in as people who want to be like on a list of stuff. And I think that's also important, making sure that people are like we've seen issues in the past where people would publish lists but not ask for permission, and then people would
Mhm.
get misgendered and things like that. It's like, oh no, actually, I don't want to be on this list because I don't identify that way, and like it's so important also to check. But also, a great way around that is to do what you're doing and just like add people and not necessarily identify them as like women in hardware or like people of color in hardware or whatever, and just be like, here's some cool people that don't look like the regular people that you see at the top with the TV shows and whatnot. And
Yeah, I mean, I just hate being at the end point where you're determining content and then saying, "Oh, I need to go find a person who is a woman." Like that seems wrong to me. Whereas if your pool is diverse enough, your stories will be diverse. You don't. It's not a thing you have to struggle for. One
yeah,
thing we do at Fair is we don't ask people to come and speak on being a representative of their gender or their status or whatever, um, because a lot of people, most people don't want that to be the thing they're known for. Like you
exactly.
don't ask a woman to come speak about being a woman in engineering because she typically wants to be known as an engineer. She wants to speak about engineering, not being a woman, right? So
Typically,
we
yeah, and
try to
typically
avoid that as well.
you're there because your interest is in like 3D
Exactly.
printing or electronics or whatever. Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And there's so much more that we can say on this. There's other people who are more qualified to say this than I am, but just an extra little thing about like that becoming someone's sort of extra job or something that takes up part of their space that they're given to talk
Yeah.
about their work gets taken up by that, and they have to spend extra energy on it. So the more that we can sort of spend that energy to find people and dig people up and just highlight the beautiful things that they're doing for the beauty of that and the interest of that, and like that, oh, it's so powerful. Oh, well, let's see. We're just we're almost over our time now, but I would love to hear if there's anything else you'd like to throw in there before we wrap up. I think this went so in such an interesting direction. I love it. Anything that you'd like to end with before we wrap up and show people all your links again?
Oh, well, I could always promote stuff. Make Magazine, subscribe to Make
Eh,
Magazine, check out magazine.com, for more information on that. The Controller Project, .com. It's getting a new website soon, much prettier. That's where you can read
ooh,
about, building the controllers for people with physical disabilities. Even though I'm happy to have volunteers to 3D print, what I would really love is people who are good at designing things to volunteer to tackle some problems and try to
ooh.
design some solutions. Thus, the only stipulation is you have to give the files away for free for anyone to print. Um,
How do
that's
people
really all I
find
have.
out, what are the is there a place
No, I
that,
I
like,
really
you can
should
request a thing?
I really should add a section that is like common problems
Mm.
or specific problems to tackle. I've got a couple prizes I've collected to hold little mini contests, but there isn't anything right now. You would just have to talk to me, and I can say, well, I've had 2 or 3 people ask for this, or but I don't really have anything documented right now.
Well, it's still very cool, and for lots of those other ones, you mentioned that there's an Xbox One and a DualShock PlayStation controller, that you made sure that those were available for people, so, those are already if you do want to either create some things for a friend of yours or for yourself or, just get started printing these things, there's a way to do that. I noticed that you're very brave, you put your phone number on your Twitter, so Caleb is very reachable,
Oh my
if you
goodness. I'm gonna take
maybe
that
I
off.
shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry.
I wondered why I get so many spam calls.
Oh no. I mean, that might just be a fact of human life nowadays, honestly, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Oh
I may be brave, but I'm taking that off.
no. Okay, I'll see what we can do to cut that out in the
Those of
future.
you watching, you have my cell phone number for now. Write it
Shh.
down. I'm gonna
So
start getting texts right now.
so then, of course, um, yeah, here's your Instagram. We've got your YouTube channel as well, which we didn't even dig into at all. All kinds of beautiful videos. You do such gorgeous videos
Oh,
about
thank you.
engraving, but also angry goose chasing.
Yeah,
Seriously,
yeah,
everyone follow Caleb. He'll make your feed so much more delightful in so many different ways. Your website, the makezine.com, of course, the controller project, absolutely get involved here. And you can find out about future maker fairs, and maybe you'll all
perfect.
run into each other and it'll be beautiful and we'll have a community in real life again. It'll be so good. Ah, did I miss anything?
I think that's everything.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Cable.
I get that one a lot,
Electronics on
actually.
the brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because electronics,
Hmm.
and also mechanics, I guess. Thank you so much for joining us, and powering through all these weird technical things with me. And yeah, come back on anytime. I'll hope to see you in person soon.
Looking forward to it.
Ciao, and thanks everyone for joining. Bye.